What's up guys, Justin here with the SketchUpEssentials.com. So in today's video, we're going to check out a feature that allows you to combine different textures in SketchUp. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. So this is actually a feature that I didn't realize was a thing that Eric from the SketchUp team did a video on last week. And basically allows you to take your texture images from things like landscapes and other things like that and combine them so that you can edit those textures in order to more customize them in SketchUp. And so this actually opens up some really interesting possibilities. So let's go ahead and let's jump over into SketchUp and let's take a look at the way that this works. All right, and so what we're going to do in this situation is we're going to go ahead and we're going to demo this using a terrain. But then I want to talk about another cool application that's possible for this that I think is kind of interesting. But first off, let's go ahead and pick a location. So I'm just going to add a location, and I've just picked a location in Castle Rock, Colorado, up the road. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring this in. Well, when I do this, what you're going to notice is you're going to notice that this actually does bring this in as a map. But if you pay a little bit more attention to this, this is actually doing something kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to unlock this surface, right? And I've got my hidden geometry toggled on just so that you can see it. But if you click in here, notice what this has done is this has actually applied each one of these images as a tile, right? So if I come in here and I try to select one of these, notice how it's actually broken this surface up into tiles, then brought in multiple different tiles and applied it to the surface. And you can kind of see that if you go into the in model section, you can see all of the tiles that you have in here, which is fine. No big deal if you're just working in SketchUp, right? But say that you wanted to edit that texture image and put some like information on here or something like that. Well, right now you can't really do that, right? So if I was to try to select this image, notice I'm just getting one of these snapshots and I want all of these as one image. Well, the interesting thing that you can do is you can go into this surface, and again, remember that I right clicked and I unlocked it, but I want to double click in here and I actually want to turn on my hidden geometry and I want to select all of these surfaces like this, right? So I've got the 6 images selected. If you right click on this, notice how there's an option here to combine textures. It's going to ask if we want to erase the interior images. In this case, I'm going to say yes. And one thing Eric points out in his video, which is probably a good idea, is it's probably a good idea to make a copy of this surface first. So I'm just going to use the move tool in copy mode and create a copy up here, just in case you need it before you do this. But now I'm going to select this surface, right click, and I'm going to combine my textures. We're going to say yes to erase interior images. You don't always have to do that, but I don't really need these anymore because they were just brought in as something to help with the texture import process. So if I say yes, notice how what this does is this erases the interior images, or the interior edges, but it also combines all of these textures into a singular image like this. Now, this is super interesting because what this has done is this has taken this and it's created a single image that I can now right click on and I can edit with my texture editor. And so for me, if I right click on this, it's going to open this up in Photoshop because I've set that as my texture editor. Depending on what you have, you can go to Window, Preferences, and under Applications, just go find the exe file, the executable file for whatever your image editor is going to be. This will open up your image in that editor. So I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to jump over into Photoshop. Now I'm not going to do a ton here. I'm just going to maybe make a copy of this, maybe mask it out like this. So we're just going to add a layer mask, and then we're just going to take this and we'll just kind of overlay it with a color right here. So we'll bring the opacity down like this, and we'll go ahead and say this is going to be like a red color, right? And then we could also mark something up if we wanted to. So say we wanted to do something like this, right? So very simple edits, but it's going to give you an idea of what we can do here. So what we need to do, and this is something that differs on my PC from the Mac version in the other tutorial. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if PC just handles this differently. I can go ahead and I can save this, but I need to export it to an image, right? So I'm going to take this, I'm going to do a file, export. And you can export it as a PNG or a JPEG, whatever you want. But I'm gonna go ahead and export this. But I'm gonna go ahead and export this to an image. Well, now what I can do is I'm actually going to show up over here and I'm going to, inside of the material, right here, I'm going to update the reference to the texture image. And so I'm just gonna find that texture file that I just exported. I'm going to open it up, and notice what that does is that basically just replaces the image that's referenced by this material with the new image that we just exported from our texture editor. Now, one thing about that is if you jump over into this other mode, right here, if you want to look at terrain mode, notice how that doesn't show up. Well, what you need to do is you just need to take this material, and I'm just going to double click on it, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to texture, and you need to make sure that you're inside the group to do this. Notice how I can select this whole face, but we can go to texture, and I want to set it to projected, and then I want to sample it. So I'm going to sample this texture right here, and then I can toggle over into this other mode. So when I do that, what that's going to allow me to do, and I'm going to right click and unlock this, is apply this new material in here, and actually you need to apply it to the surface. Just like this, right? So because we set that as a projected texture, that's gonna work just fine. If we hadn't set it as a projected texture, it's gonna come in here and it's going to break everything from a mapping standpoint. But so you can use this in order to export these specific images like this one and edit them and make changes so that you can actually use textures to indicate things on surfaces in SketchUp. And so there's actually a kind of interesting application for this in the sense that you don't have to just use it for things like terrains. So let's say, for example, that I was to apply, I don't know if this works with colors actually. I don't think it does. Let's go ahead and let's apply some textures to it. So I'm just going to these are basically going to be placeholder textures is all that they're going to be. And they're really kind of indicating locations on my screen, right? So I'm setting this up so that these are kind of placeholders. Like say I had like a bookshelf or something like that and I wanted to put books on a shelf. Well, what I could do is I could use the texture images like this as kind of placeholders for actual textures or actual images that you could swap out really easily. Like let's say, for example, that I was to right click on this and do a combine textures, and we're going to say no on erasing interior edges. But now if I select this, notice what this did is this created almost like a texture atlas file, right? So if I mouse over this, and let's go ahead and let's edit this in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and do an edit texture image. Well, if I look at this, this is actually multiple different locations, which I could then use to do some really interesting things, right? So I'm basically using this as kind of a location function in here. But now, say that I was to import an image. So I'm going to do a file, import, and I just downloaded a picture from Unsplash. It's just these books from Nick Fewings, if you want to go find that. But you could really find any book images that you wanted to. But what I could do is, let's say that I wanted to use this to kind of indicate some books on a shelf, right? And I'm really going to use these bottom ones because it kind of cuts them off at the top. But I'm going to go ahead and hit the Enter key, and I'm going to probably create a copy right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask out everything but these books, right? So we'll just do a quick mask, and we'll do the same thing on the second image. But let's say I took this and I just kind of repeated it across these surfaces. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to block out the background or hide the background, right? So I've got this like PNG image right here that has transparency. Well, if I was to take this and I was to export it, right? So I'm going to export it as a PNG. You want to make sure that you have transparency. And we're going to go ahead and we're just going to call this books. But if we go back into SketchUp, right, and select this material, and go into edit and just swap this out so that it references our books image. notice what we could do is we could use this in order to really quickly create these like masked out images in here. So you could use your image file in order to swap out different books and other things like that. So you could use this to put books on a shelf, create different, really you could create different like texture atlas files and things. There's just a lot of interesting things that you could do with this application. So that combine textures function is actually really cool. All right, so that's where I'm in this video. Leave a comment below. Let me know if this is interesting to you and what you might do with it. I just love having that conversation with you guys. If you do want to learn more about how to use SketchUp, make sure you check out my course at thesketchupessentials.com/course. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.